Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the chat room. Today, I am here with Rachel. She is a teacher in New Jersey, so she is going to share some information with us. Thank you for being here, Rachel.
You're welcome. Hello, everybody.
And we're going to get right into it. So you've been teaching for quite a while. How many years have you been a teacher for?
So I've been teaching, I'm starting my 10th and a half year. I know that sounds awkward, but I got hired mid-year because initially I couldn't find a job in New Jersey. Finding teaching jobs when I first got out of college was pretty tough. So I was a paraprofessional from September to January. And then that January, that school actually hired me. So yeah, a whole decade plus, which is kind of scary.
And have you been at the same school the whole time, or have you switched schools?
I've actually been in the same school the whole time. Not a lot of people do that, but a small school where I work, and I was getting nervous because our tenure starts over again. So yes, if coronavirus were to come up or the school's losing money or whatever, you become the person at the bottom again. So for me, my job security is nice, even though, I know certain people think other things about job security, but
Yeah,
I still work my butt off. So
you do. All teachers do.
yeah.
For those who don't know, can you explain what tenure is?
Oh yeah. So tenure is per school, and you have to work a certain amount of years and have good observations. So essentially it's like a trial run to see if the school wants to take you on in a permanent capacity. So tenure pretty much gives you job security for majority of everything, unless you're found to have done something outrageous, like not being.
Something not job appropriate.
Yes, exactly. It has to be safe. So we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
So that's what tenure is. And when I first was hired, it was 3 years, but now in New Jersey, they've changed to 4 years. So you have to make it 4 years and a day. So you have to make it to that September for it to be tenured technically. So.
Gotcha. That's good to know. I didn't know that it starts over if you move. I thought it was just as long as you're in the state. So good information.
No, yeah. Which I can understand because, other schools don't know you. So
Yeah.
why would they want to say oh yeah, we'll take you permanently, and you could be, a
Not a
lunatic.
great teacher. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
What certifications did you need to get started teaching in your state?
So in New Jersey, all you need is a bachelor's degree to teach. When I went to school, I went for my dual certification. So I have my elementary education degree that goes from pre-K to 6th grade. And I also have my special ed, they call it an endorsement. So it's like an add-on to your degree. So I can teach special ed through 6th grade by myself. And then beyond, I could do any grade level up to 12th grade, but I would have to be in a co-teaching capacity because I don't have the specialty degrees, like an English degree or a math degree or science, history, for me to prove that I'm qualified to teach those.
Yeah. In Texas, it's a little bit different because you get certified in K through 6 or pre-K through 6, but then the special ed is its own thing. So you actually get certified in pre-K through 12th grade in Texas. So it's always interesting to hear how the different states set it up and kind of what you're able to do with what you have.
Yeah, it's when I first started in my district, I was a preschool disabled teacher, and absolutely loved it. But it was from January to June, and then my admin called me into the office, and they're like, "Well, what do you think about teaching middle school?" And I didn't want to lose my job. So I was like, okay, sure. Now, I mean, very iffy. And that first year it was pretty intense. I mean, there were days I was crying at my desk, just having little mini meltdowns,
Mm-hmm.
and also, having eighth graders. I was 23 and the eighth graders are what, 14?
Yeah.
So that was a little awkward because, the boys are boys. And so you had to be I just felt really nervous to always like be extra careful,
Mm-hmm.
So there was that. And anyway, so the reason that I could teach sixth, seventh, and eighth grade language arts and math is because it's an inclusion room, which means that there are regular education children and special education children in the same room. So you have two teachers that are required by new regulations. So there's the regular ed teacher and the special ed teacher. But the regular ed teacher is qualified in that content, so I didn't have to be. But I can tell you, it does put you at a big disadvantage, because there's all these things you're supposed to know how to teach and modify, and I didn't know the curriculum well, and I was just trying every night to like read up the best I could. But 3 grade levels, 2 subjects, also being 23, I mean, like, I was a lot younger, so you don't really know like how to effectively classroom manage and things like that. So I was learning all of that stuff as well. So, the mini meltdowns at my desk and at home for that matter, I mean, a little bit more prevalent that year, but it has gotten a lot better.
And I'll say, I don't think that age doesn't matter. It's just being a new teacher, because I got into teaching later than you did, and I still was like learning that classroom management stuff and having those meltdowns and just being like, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing, So
Right.
it's definitely like learning on the fly a lot of times, because you can only learn so much from a book, and then actually doing it in person is completely different.
Oh yeah, totally. And it's, even if you do learn a management style for one group, it's not necessarily the same management style you need for another group, or the way you converse with a certain student is not the way you converse with another student.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely a lot of give and take, and just, I guess one of the hardest lessons I had to learn, because you're always thinking in your head, and I know like when I was a kid, like, teacher knew everything. You just thought they knew everything. They were doing it for a reason. Like, they're the adult, you didn't know any different.
Yeah.
But then being in that hole, I was like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. Like half the time, and I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to try this because I don't know what else to do. And sometimes it would work. And you're like, yes. And other times you're like, well, that didn't work. So let me think of something else. Because it's hard to, in the beginning, you want to make sure that you're showing you're competent, but also learning to say, I'm not exactly sure what to do here. This is what I think would work. So let's try it. And if not, we'll go back to the drawing board. And I think that's hard for a lot of new teachers.
Yeah. To admit that you're not sure, because it's almost kind of saying like, maybe I'm not qualified for the job, which it's not. It's, we're also learning a new job, so.
Exactly. And, also using your colleagues effectively, because in school districts, you can have a wide array of personalities and people and backgrounds. And so not all teachers think alike. Their methodologies are different. And it's hard, especially like in a departmentalized area, in middle school, they have so many teachers. And so I have the luxury of being in a small school, so we do collaborate a lot, but it's interesting because, when a certain student, and especially more specific to special, like when student X is having a hard time in one subject, but they don't in another subject, you want to offer like what you're doing to help, and not always well received. So you have to kind of know your people and know your boundaries, and, you know, just do what you can, you know, because all you can control is your little bubble, and, you know, try to help out. And sometimes it works really well, and other times it doesn't. And, you know, you just got to kind of roll with it.
So if somebody were starting out in a district in New Jersey, and I know it varies depending on what district you're in, but in general, do you know how much the starting salary is right now for a new teacher?
So it does, there are some great disparities in New Jersey. For instance, like in my district, I started off at, it was either 50 or 52, which actually was fairly high. But I can say that on my pay scale, we top out pretty low. So you start off high, but you don't get the increments that you would in other districts. Whereas if you were working more of a city school, the pay might be 45, 47, somewhere in there. But by the end of your career, work your 25 years plus, you could be making 100 grand. Whereas my district tops out at 85 as of right now. You know, I've got another whole half plus of my career to go, so I'm sure it will go up based off of living expenses, but it's still always going to be low. And that's something that I've kind of toyed with as well, because, you know, like in inner city schools, it comes with a whole different, it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
And so I go back and forth, like, is the money worth it? You know, like, is that what I want to do? And some people absolutely love that whole inner city, you know, working with the kids in that capacity. And I just don't know if I have the personality for it. So I think that's why I've kind of decided to stay.
Yeah, well, they typically tend to be bigger schools, and then the commute. I don't know if anybody's ever lived in New Jersey like the both of us have, but commuting into city areas is not fun. It takes a
No,
long time. A lot of
no. I know that I actually live 45 minutes away from my school, but it's a straight shot 45 minutes because I go the opposite way of traffic. Yeah, it's kind of a long ride, and I know in New Jersey that's like nothing. It's like a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
But I know other areas, they're like 45 minutes? What? Almost an hour? You know, like it is, you know, but it's all relative. Like New Jersey, you know, my mother is also a teacher, and she teaches in a city, and her commute, if there were no traffic, would be 45 minutes. But she commutes and it's like an hour and a half.
Yeah. So for your school, I know you're on the smaller side, but just like in general, you know, what is the average size of a general education class?
So the majority of classes in New Jersey now are inclusion classes. So like I said before, it's the regular ed and the special ed kids in the same room with two teachers. That being said, I would say, again, the numbers do greatly range. Inner cities usually have higher numbers per class, and the suburb areas or the more affluent areas have smaller class sizes. So for instance, in my school, we're a pre-K to 8 school, and then our kids go into like a regionalized high school where there's a couple different sending districts going into that high school filtering in. So I would say pre-K to 5, they probably have, like, they're very fortunate where it's, you know, 15, 16 kids, which is great, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. When you get to the middle school, there's 25, 28 because they combine the classes. They think they're older, so it's okay. And, you know, it does work. Like, I understand the thought behind it. It does get a little difficult putting 28 middle school bodies plus 2 teachers in a room and everybody feel like they have elbow room, you know?
Yeah.
So it's a tight squeeze, but it's done and it works out okay, you know, but it takes a lot of work. It does, to monitor 28 kids and make sure they're all doing it. They understand what they're doing, you know, because middle schoolers, they get a little hesitant about asking for help. Some of them, you know, are embarrassed, and a lot of them are, per se, my students, you know, my students, the special ed kids, even though the teachers I work with, we very much have a mentality that like the whole class is ours, which is great, because with that divide of your kids, my kids, it doesn't work well.
Yeah.
So that's another fortunate thing. So, you know, but as far as I know, you can have 32 kids in a class in New Jersey. I believe you can have a few more if you add an aide or a paraprofessional in the room. So I've heard people having classes of 40 with, you know, a paraprofessional in the room.
It's so many kids in one.
Yeah, it's a lot. And that's not the norm, though. The norm, I would say, is probably like somewhere in the 20s, 25, usually numbers across the board.
Yeah. In a special education program, they typically have their own individualized education plan. So I would assume that you are the person responsible for following that. How many children per year do you typically have, you know, on your roster that you are responsible for, you know, keeping track of, putting out, you know, things for them and report cards and updating those files and stuff?
So on average, I probably have anywhere from, I would say, in each grade level, like, so this past year, I taught 5th and 6th grade. And I did 5th grade language arts math and 6th grade just math. But as far as kids that would roll directly to me, that because they have IEPs, which is their individualized education plan, I would probably say I usually have about 7 to 10 in each grade. So, you know, that's 14 to 20 kids that roll to me. And I mean, I know other teachers have a lot more, so I am fortunate. I do find it very stressful though, you know, because their plans are individualized. And then you have to take that into account, which each kid needs. And then they're also in an inclusion class, so there's Russian students. So you kind of have to really balance okay, I know we have to go at a certain pace for, you know, student A, but student B is excelling. So where's that middle ground? With certain special education students, there are certain concepts that just don't click in their brain. No matter how you teach it, no matter what you say, no matter how many times you go over it, it just doesn't seem like make that connection in the brain. And that gets a little tough too, you know, because you kind of feel like, what more can I do? Like, what else can I try? And at a certain point, you have to say, okay, well, I'm not going to give up, but I have to be realistic about, you know, is this something that they are definitely going to need for their life, and I need to teach them a strategy to work around their lack of connection there? Or is it something that they may never need, and so that's okay if they're not fully understanding it?
Yeah. Prioritizing.
Yes, and it's tough. It really is. You know, teachers, I feel like the majority of us want to work and work and work until it gets to be like, oh yes, they've got it, you know? And, you know, sometimes you have to figure out where that line is, and it stinks. It's not a great feeling, but
yeah,
I guess.
it's interesting too, like state to state, how they break up special education. And I may do another episode just specifically talking to a lot of people because obviously I know a lot of people that work in the special education field. And I think state to state and even just district to district, it's so different how
Yes.
they're set up, which is interesting, and I don't know that that's a good thing. I almost kind of wish it was a little more standardized, but
Yep. Yeah. It's the interesting thing because I know like in the state of New Jersey, we do standardized testing. And theoretically, when Park came out, that was supposed to be across the country. Everybody, now we can like become a level playing field as a country because, that's another thing that is a little concerning. I mean, we're in the tri-state area, so typically our school systems are known for being higher in rigor than some school systems towards the south, like Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana. So when Park first came out, that's what was so controversial about it, because just pushing out this test, and New Jersey was struggling with it because it's very specific in the way it's worded. So you almost had to teach the kids the wording of it so they understood what was being asked. It's not that they didn't know it. They didn't know that that's what they wanted. So, and then, you have other districts or in other states that were struggling across the board just because their education system is set up differently, which, I mean, the Park did end up pretty much going away. I know New Jersey adopted something called the NJSLA, which is kind of based off of the Park, in my opinion. And, it's okay. I mean, I understand you want to get like where everybody is, but I don't know what the answer is to that, because you got to.
yeah, I don't know that there is an answer.
Yeah, at this point, I don't know, unless they completely redo our education system.
Yeah.
Say in what is it, Finland, right? They have one of the best education systems.
It might, yeah. I mean, I know it's some like Nordic area country that has like one of the.
It is. I think, yeah. Well, anyway, I mean, it's interesting, like read on that kind of stuff, because approach is 90% of it when you get down to it. So
Yeah. And I mean, that's part of why I left education, was the standardized testing. It just became so disheartening watching my kids make all these strides that year and then be knocked down because they're taking a test that they're not at the level of. They're in special education for a reason. They are behind their peers, but that doesn't mean that they're not learning and they're not making these huge leaps and bounds. And then you make them take this test that's not at their level. It's ahead of their level, and they're smart enough to know that they're not on the level of their peers, and it just knocked them down, and they just were so disheartened. And I gave them that test, and I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, it is. It is really tough. And I always tell my kids, because they're behind, they may not pass or whatever, but I'm like, look, you're just trying to beat your score from last year. Mm-hmm. You made these great strides, so let's try to remember to use this strategy or that strategy. And, it does make a difference, because in my 5th grade class, my co-teacher and I, we have them like plot scores from 4th grade. And then when we get the scores back from 5th grade, so they'll be in 6th grade before they know about it.
Right.
Actually have them plot them again just to see their growth. And it's amazing. Like certain special ed kids can jump 10, 20 points, which is an insane amount of growth. They still might not be passing, but 20 points, that's like
huge.
That's huge. And so, we really put emphasis on that, because I hate seeing that same thing, like where are they seeing how far they've come? So that's what we kind of came up with, using with had, and it does seem to make a difference, because the kids, honestly, they want to see themselves succeed. I did bust my butt and it got me somewhere, so it's nice when they're like, that's the score this year? You mean like that's my score? And I'm like, yeah, that's your score, and it's exciting to see that.
Such a great feeling. Oh, I love it. What made you specifically want to go into special education?
Mm. Um, well, my mom's a special education teacher, and so I've kind of always seen her and like those discussions that are going on in my house. Like we're always around education usually, you know, she was talking about work or whatever. Just by default, I think it was like, you know, I just heard it so much. um, but I knew I wanted to, like, I've always seen myself as a teacher, even when I was little. You know, I would have like my little chalkboard and my stuffed animals would be my students, and, you know, like
Yeah.
play teacher. So when I went for it, um, I first started off at a county college, which is a 2-year college, and I went for childhood education, which is only um, preschool to 3rd grade. So that degree would only allow you to teach those levels. And then as I was doing some more research, and college professors would talk to you when I went to a 4-year school to finish up my bachelor's, you know, they said that that field is pretty saturated right now, like those grade levels, and that you probably want to get your special ed cert, because then you're more likely, like you're more eligible for positions you can apply for. So that's what steered me into the special ed. And now that I'm there, I'm thankful that I did that, because I do like to problem solve, I guess, you know, and every kid's different and you have to just keep trying and trying. So it's a brand new every day, you know, good, bad, and different. You never know what you're walking into. So,
Keeps
you
it
know,
interesting.
and I am thankful I did, because when I graduated, it was right after um, the stock market
Yeah, the
crash.
2008.
So jobs were really hard. Yeah. So initially, like I said before, I couldn't find a job, so I took a paraprofessional position just to try to get some experience, some sort of networking going on, and it worked out for me. So that was really good, you know, and I was hired as special ed. So, you know, I know that there was a couple of other friends of mine that went for elementary ed and they had a harder time finding a position.
Mhm.
So it was just like luck of the draw, the way things worked out for me. But I'm glad I did it, you know?
Yeah. Yep. So this year has been very different from other years with the whole coronavirus. So how has that affected or changed your job? Um, you know, and where do you see it, or do you even know yet how it's going to affect next year?
So funny you ask, we just got some information on Monday about my school's preliminary plan to submit to state. So in New Jersey, they have to submit a reopening plan to the Department of Education for approval, before a month before you open. So pretty much that's like August 1st, let's just say. And it's concerning to me, you know, and I do go back and forth with it. So just to rewind a little bit, from the middle of March through June, we did remote learning. And remote learning, you know, is having the kids either Zoom chatting with you or some sort of video chat, or, you know, watching videos on different websites, or taping myself with the lessons, you know, and them watching that in some capacity and then trying to execute what they were supposed to do. It was definitely tricky at first. You know, the kids didn't know how to log in. Like it was a whirlwind. You know, Friday we came in, one Thursday night we got an email saying that be prepared to be working really hard tomorrow because we have to create a packet for every student for 2 weeks because Monday we're most likely not coming back. So that Friday was, I wish I could forget it, honestly. But it was quite busy, you know, and then you get the kids to remember their logins and to, you know, just be able to maneuver the computer components and what could we send home for 2 weeks that they could theoretically do somewhat independently. And, you know, and then there's the whole idea of the special education, you know, component. It's like you're at a loss. Like 2 weeks is a long time. So anyways, once we found out that like it was going to get extended and then they finally said we're going till June, my coworkers and I decided we were going to go to all remote learning because at least I had a little bit more control over contact with the kids. You know, modified work. I could send my kids modified work and, you know, higher level kids could work for their level. So it was easier to scaffold that way. Still wasn't ideal, you know, because you kind of had to work with what you had. But as the kids got to know the feel of it and as I wrapped my head around it, because it was a lot of systems to learn, you know, and the kids would be like, you know, it's not loading, the website's not loading. And like, I'm not, you know, an IT person, but I felt like I became one through Google, you know, like Googling.
And you're not there to help them, so it's even more frustrating to try to explain it over technology, you know,
Yes,
able to walk
yes.
through it in person.
Yeah. And some of the kids, like they learned how to share their screens and they were like, look, this is what I'm seeing. And like, I was like, oh, they know how to do that, you know,
Yeah.
because it helped that way. You know, I'm not an Apple user. I'm not like on the up and up with the most current. So, you know, it's quite different than PC and Android and, you know, Windows like that. So that was tricky. Now we've been waiting all summer just to see what potentially our school is going to decide. And my school announced that we're going back 5 days a week with all students at the time. And we're going to do early dismissal schedules. And if students opt to stay virtual learning, they can, but all staff need to go back. And
Can I ask you how you feel about that?
sure. I have some big reservations about it, you know, especially going to, I'm middle school math this coming year. So I have sixth, 7th, and 8th graders. And they're large class sizes and they could hardly fit before COVID. So now what is the spacing going to be like? You know, what protections are given to the staff, you know, because kids, I know they're less likely to get it or they could be asymptomatic, you know, they're more commonly asymptomatic. So even though they're saying contact tracing and taking temperatures and looking for symptoms before they enter the school, well, if they're asymptomatic, you're not going to know until somebody gets COVID. So I'm trying to not completely freak out. My administration said, you know, that would go back with modifications, and the modifications are currently being discussed. So I raised my concerns to my admin in hopes that these modifications will somehow help, you know, my concerns. I don't know. I'm still very iffy, and it's tough. It's really hard because I want to teach. I enjoy teaching, you know, but I'm also very worried for myself, you know, and my other colleagues. I mean, I'm fairly healthy. I have some other colleagues that, you know, had cancer and they've beaten cancer, but they're immunocompromised, you know, like there's older teachers in the building and, you know, I don't know. It's concerning for everybody, for the kids, for us, for everybody.
Yeah, it's a scary reality, and I don't think there's any good solution to it. So I think it's like you said, just modifications and seeing how it works out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess we'll see. I'm just hoping that at the very least, my district is trying to figure out how to give proper spacing for the middle schoolers, because I think that's my biggest concern,
Yeah.
you know, um, because if they are going to put them in the same way we have in the past, like somebody's going to end up getting COVID.
Yeah.
So, you know, yeah,
Ugh.
I know, right? It's scary to even think like that. Like
Yeah.
I never thought in my wildest dreams that I'd be afraid to go back to school,
Yeah.
because
With
I'm not.
all the craziness that has happened at past schools and scary things that could happen, like this is a new level of you can't stop it because you can't see it.
Right. Well, and the lack of control. Like I feel like lack of control over your own health. And
Mm-hmm.
that's that's what scares me the most, because if I decide to go back and teach, like it's a crapshoot, like
Yeah.
it's tricky. And then you hear in the news how, there's a couple teachers in another state that were social distancing, but in this room, and they were remote learning, and all three of them got it and one died, like that's scary. There were no kids in the room. That's
Yeah.
scary. So, I mean, I guess we'll see.
What would you say is the hardest part of your job? And I know that that's probably a hard thing to answer because there's a lot of different things that you do for your job. But if you had to pick something like, what is the hardest part of working in special education in a public school?
Um, I probably would have to say getting all of the proper resources or support needed for individual students. Because public schools, a lot of it is driven by money, which understandably so, there's only a certain amount the school has. And that's where I struggle probably the most. And it's the most taxing and weighing on me, because I I keep advocating. I don't go away. My administration, like, and I really try to think about it logically and come up with solutions, and just getting around the red tape. It drives me nuts because like, yeah, we're there for the kids, but only to an extent in some instances. I have to say my administration, I think I'm fairly fortunate. Um, but everything takes a really long time, especially if it's a new idea that needs to happen or be adapted or something. It's more on the staffing end. I have a harder time, again, with like teachers having different mentalities, and, certain teachers saying, well, this has always worked in the past. Well, this is a different group. It may not work. You can't just force them to do what you want them to do, because
Yeah.
it's not clicking with them, So that's where I struggle the most. And it takes a lot of time. It does, to document and research, and, because I don't want to be one of those people that goes in there and just complains. That's not productive either, So I try to think of, okay, well, these are the kinds of our building, like what is feasible.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I would say that's probably the hardest part.
What is the best part of your job? The most rewarding, the thing that makes you come back year after year?
It's definitely the kids' progression. I just love seeing kids in a multitude of capacities, like beyond the academics, like just seeing them becoming more confident in themselves. And, I, in the past, I've had some students who are on, the ASD spectrum, so the autism spectrum, and, seeing how they grow. It's not always about just say the academics. Of course, like academics are a component, but seeing kids that were so locked into like their own thoughts that it wasn't registering what was on in the environment. And now like seeing kids that were like that just the year before, they're having full conversations, like a give and take. It's not like robotic, it's not like, oh yeah, I've just been taught this. It's more fluid. And like, there's nothing more that like what brings like tears to your eyes. Like they understand it, they're applying it, and they're excelling in it, because that's a life skill, like that's ultimately, you want to try to make them as ready for life as you can, so that's the most rewarding part, and like just seeing the kids when that they know they did a good job, even middle schoolers, you'll see their eyes go, like, oh my gosh, I did it. They won't like jump for joy like the little girl, but
they got to say cool.
Yeah, of course, but it's still nice to see. That's like what you're working for, and it's the ultimate like dangling carrot, like, oh yeah, I finally got that carrot. So, I would say that's it.
Yeah, I mean, when I taught the little, and it was very interesting to even, I feel like just coming back from things like winter break or things like that, like they grow so much. It's like you were gone for 2 weeks and now you're, an entire inch taller and so much more mature.
When I taught preschool, you do see the growth daily, like the massive amount of growth preschoolers make is just unreal. As older, it gets a little bit longer and make that growth and a little less obvious.
Yeah.
But nothing like seeing a preschooler's face light up because they finally, were able to, walk up the stairs, bipedal, so they weren't 1-1, 2-2, they were doing it and they've been practicing, so it's so cute. Those little guys, I miss them, but.
Okay, so to wrap it up, what is something that people who are thinking or considering of going into the education system or specifically going into special education, what is something they should know before going into the field?
That nobody has the answer for everything. A lot of it is trial and error. What you learn in college is a good starting point, but it's not nearly all you need to know. You need to be ready to research and learn more and be an active participant in what's going on in your room. Because again, every year is different and every kid is different and you're different. So, it's not a one size fit all, so it's very much learning on the fly, which is mentally taxing. At the end of the day, I'm like, I don't want to talk to another individual after 3:00, like just go home to my dog and like, that's it, no talking. But it is ultimately rewarding and there's always something new. You won't ever feel like bored and it's not stagnant, that's for sure.
I bet. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for doing this with me today and for sharing all of your knowledge with people who may want to go into the field, who are just curious about hearing about the field. And is there anything else you want to share before we end this?
I mean, I hope I didn't scare anybody. Because ultimately teaching, it's a great job. And if you can get around the other junky things at the core of it, it's very rewarding. So, like in any other job, there's the good with the bad. So I just hopefully highlighted some good too.
You Good. I think you shared a good portion of like the positive along with
Okay,
the
good,
frustration.
good, good.
Yeah. Um, we'll be coming out with more videos soon. Please follow us on Twitter at Untitled Meg, and you can find us on Instagram at Untitled_women. Make sure you subscribe below, and thank you again, Rachel, for joining us. And keep an eye out. We will be putting up new videos soon.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Hi.